record now, Diantha.
Okay.
With a reading from Discourses, page 392, Baba says, complete detachment is one of the essential conditions of lasting and true happiness. For the person who has complete detachment no longer creates for himself the suffering that is due to the unending thraldom produced by desires. Desirelessness makes an individual firm like a rock. He is neither moved by pleasure nor by sorrow. He is not upset by the onslaughts of opposites. The steadiness and equanimity that remain unaffected by opposites is possible only through complete detachment, which is an essential condition of lasting and true happiness. The individual who has complete detachment is not at the mercy of the opposites of experience, and being free from the thraldom of all desires, he no longer creates his own suffering. So, what an amazing teaching. And you know, my thought is, and how difficult it is to live that 24/7. Detachment is something that this work of Byron Katie has helped me to slowly integrate into my life more and more. And then when I read Baba's words and he emphasizes how critical it is, you know, it's part of becoming desireless. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say on that quote I just read from Baba?
I'd like to say something.
Good.
Well, they say in the 12 steps, detach with love. If you can't detach with love, detach with courtesy. If you can't detach with courtesy, detach with an axe.
Detach with what?
What?
An axe.
An axe?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that is really interesting. Yeah. And I think Baba and the work have helped me learn to detach with love. And I didn't know how to do that before. And it's been a real work in progress. Anybody else want to share anything about detachment? It's an essential condition for lasting and true happiness.
It seems to be one of those things that it's a lifelong project, and perhaps many, many lifetimes. Detachment,
Yes.
resulting in, it seems to me, egoless state.
Thank you, Douglas. I really appreciate that. Yes, that feels very true to me. And as I've said many times in this inquiry circle, I do notice that life gets easier and lighter, and the challenges are always there. But for me, detachment has been critically important. And I can tell when I'm upset, I'm noticing what I'm attached to. So anybody else have anything that you'd like to say before we jump into our inquiry work for today?
Okay, oh, you've got earphones on.
Okay, was somebody talking? Okay, I don't think anybody was.
I have someone drilling outside my window. Maybe you'd like me to mute. You hear?
Oh, well, as long as you unmute to say stuff, because we always like to hear from you.
And this is Robin Oppenheim. I wanted to introduce. She's
Hi, welcome, Robin.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Hi. I know a lot of faces. Hi, Tina. I see Tina and Anne. And who else do I see? We're not in. Oh, okay. Now she changed the view. Rakesh is there. Oh, Douglas. Okay. Good.
Yeah. So we just read a discourse on detachment and how important it is. And now I'm just going to read something from Effort and Grace, pages 8 and 9. Our lives may seem to be long and meaningful, but truly life is, oh wait, sorry, I read that one before. This is where I am. So Darwin is saying that My experiences with Baba have helped me understand and become so familiar with impelling forces such as anger, lust, and greed that when confronted with them, I would find the antidote, which would vary for each person, appearing within my consciousness, and I could switch gears and transform them right away. We do not want to wait until these forces arise and become so impelling that we are helpless to control them. We need to plan ahead. Before these forces take hold of us and overpower us, we need to think them through to their end results and decide for ourselves that this is not the way we want to go. And just here, I want to say that this is how I find that the self-inquiry really helps me. As those of you who have been here have done inquiry and you've done the turnarounds, it's like we get practice so that the next time we get triggered, we're more prepared with different ways to respond. And that's what Darwin's talking about here. We need to plan ahead before these forces take hold of us and overpower us. We need to think them through to their end results and decide for ourselves that this is not the way we want to go. We have to consider ways to counteract these impelling forces. Redirecting them into less binding channels is one way. As spiritual aspirants, we also have to keep a sense of Baba's presence with us in these situations. My secret strategy is to become aware of Baba himself, his presence in all circumstances. He is the master of every situation. And then I'm going to go on, and the subheading is the great favor of disillusionment. We have to want inner freedom more than any illusory thing, but we are dealing with our strongest addiction, our addiction to the creation. It is my understanding that we do not make spiritual progress if we are trying to create and maintain happy conditions in duality, while still maintaining unconscious bindings such as desires. The underlying purpose of life provides for gradual growth toward reality. But if we persist in trying to maintain a gross situation, it goes against this purpose. This is when the mechanism of disillusionment becomes activated. Disillusionment, and that would apply in our individual cases to the things that we are especially attracted to and bound by, can thus be a great favor to us. Tragedies such as great losses and terrible pain give us temporary detachment. If one firmly holds on to the rock of faith, temporary detachment gradually becomes permanent inner detachment, which is based on understanding, combined with intense longing for God. Then we will seek the reality, and we begin to enter the spiritual path and work within toward truth. We look to the master within for security and support. As we go through different stages, our attitudes change. For example, in the beginning of the disillusionment process, when we are less mature, we feel thwarted and frustrated. As we become more mature, we learn how to become more detached in ways that are harmonious. Events in our lives are no longer seen as inflictions, but as blessings. In other words, as we progress, we do not always have the same reactions. The more mature we are, the more mature will be our reactions. Eventually, we are able to experience causeless happiness, an inner state of being that is not dependent upon the gross level at all. So, what we've been working on for the past few weeks is our Judge Your Neighbor worksheet on seeking love and approval and appreciation outside of ourselves. And we know that seeking love is always a cause of disillusionment because we are the love we seek. Baba lives in our heart. And what we're working on then is, in the Jungian sense, we get our judgments down on our worksheet, and then we start questioning our thoughts and withdraw the projection. So for example, we started 3 weeks ago with, they don't love me enough. And everybody found their situation that they wanted to work on. So if you haven't been here, you can just find your situation where you believe the thought that someone doesn't love you enough. And then in the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, the next statement is what we want. And so last week we worked on I want them to do what I want. And through this self-inquiry, where we discover how we react and who we would be without the thought, and then we do the turnarounds, which are the opposite. Like, I don't want them to do what I want, and then I want me to do what I want, and I want me to do what they want. We do all these turnarounds for the purpose of opening up our mind to a bigger picture. So neuroscientists have actually specifically studied this work of Byron Katie, and they found that in the left hemisphere of the brain is what they call the interpreter. And it works really hard to keep our story together, even when it's negative, because there's security in the familiar. And when we do the work and we answer these questions as honestly as we can, we start developing new neural pathways into the right hemisphere of our brain. And so we see a bigger picture. So then we can find many more options and creative solutions in our life. And I'm just reviewing this because we have some people who haven't been here before. So this week, we're going to move on to the advice we would give to that person who we believe doesn't love us enough. So this week, we're going to work on he or she should try to understand how I feel. That's the advice we're going to give today. So if you want to write that statement down, they should try to understand how I feel. That's what we're going to be working on today. And we'll be going through the 4 questions and turnarounds of the work. Now, before I continue on, does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay. I also discovered in the last few years, after facilitating this work for over a decade, I discovered that this is actually the process of Jungian psychology of projection. You know, Baba says we project the world, and he said self-realization occurs when the unconscious becomes conscious. So that's always what we're doing in this life. We're just working on becoming more and more conscious, more awakening. Jungian psychology tells us that the unconscious has to project in order to become conscious. That's how we become conscious. And so we project onto the people in our lives, we project onto the world, because that's the only way we can see our own blind spot. And so Baba says we have to get the dust off the mirror of our mind to find that reality is perfect. Byron Katie says we have to get the dust off the lens of the projector of our mind. So pretty much the same thing. So as we do this inquiry, step by baby step, we're gradually removing the dust from that mirror of our mind so that we can see that everything really happens for us, not to us. And as Baba says, Maya is the necessary medium for God realization. So this world is necessary for us to awaken to our true state. So I'm going to just read a little bit about projection. And what we do in the work is we withdraw that projection. So if we believe they don't love us enough, we come to see that what would be truer is that we're not loving ourselves enough, or we're not loving them enough. And we find ways where they do love us enough. And then we integrate the projection into ourself. And the way we integrate it is by feeling and owning all of those repressed emotions that we have not been able to really be prepared to be with, because they're confusing. And as we stop blaming anyone outside of ourselves and withdraw the projection and take responsibility for our own life, then we do feel the pain of it all. And it's really important to honor that and to mourn just believing that something actually happened that never happened. You know, Byron Katie says nothing's ever really happened. And Baba says the same thing. This is just all a dream we're waking up from. So I'm going to read this. This is from the Sufi book, Catching the Thread by Llewellyn Von Lee. And I'm going to read from page 165 to 167. And this is about withdrawing the projection. And it's very much about, well, I'm just going to begin and then we can talk about it. So through the dynamic of projection, an unknown, unconscious part of ourselves takes on the form of another. Let's see. If they were not experienced through projection, they would remain forever hidden in the unconscious, their energy undifferentiated. Through projection, they become individualized and their qualities become familiar to us. But there comes the time when it is no longer helpful to project these energies. Instead, we need to integrate them, to acknowledge them as a part of ourselves. And I'll just stop here for a minute because it reminds me of how Baba is reminding us that he's in everyone and everything. And so this is bringing us to closer and closer to a non-dual awareness, which of course the mind will never comprehend. But we're, you know, the goal of this is to go beyond the mind. So we integrate what we projected into our own awareness as a part of ourselves. We need to take responsibility for these aspects of our psyche and use their energy creatively, even the energy of the shadow. So the shadow is just all those dark hidden parts of ourself that we really don't want to acknowledge. And sometimes the shadow can include positive, creative parts that for one reason or another were suppressed when we were children. The process of psychological transformation is a process of integrating the energies of the unconscious. And if our inner figures remain always as projections, their energy can never be integrated. The inner transformation is blocked. But to withdraw the projection is not easy. And the longer a projection remains, the harder withdrawing it becomes. For the projection itself then becomes engraved within the psyche. It becomes a stone figure standing in our way. Furthermore, not only is it difficult to withdraw our negative projections, to acknowledge our own darkness, it is also difficult to withdraw positive projections. The animus and anima, and especially the higher self, are numinous, awesome energies. They are gods and goddesses. It is often easier to allow another to live out our transpersonal nature than to accept this energy as our own divine self. And of course, we as Baba lovers would say that that is Baba in us. The shadow is the dark side of the ego, but the animus and anima are archetypal figures. And their energies take us beyond the ego. They are messengers of another world. This is why they are so powerful in projection, for they have the power of love. So, to withdraw projections is a lonely process, particularly when the projection has brought the tenderness of a lover's touch, the warmth of another's heart. But there comes the time when we need to turn our attention to the inner world and embrace our own inner dynamism. This road that takes us into the beyond is the loneliest path. Two cannot walk side by side, and so often we are left seemingly desolate and isolated. But only in our inner aloneness can we be embraced by the beloved. Only when we are totally naked before him will he take us in his arms. Let's see. At the beginning, the projection, the image of the beloved, is a helpful focus for the energies of love. But eventually, for the lover to reach the goal of love, every effort must be made to tear away this veil. And so I was thinking about those words, and what comes to me with Baba is that I love meditating on his pictures. And I've also noticed that there's a shift to wanting to just feel him inside of me more. And I think that's kind of what they're referring to. There comes a place where we don't project, but we withdraw the projection. And we know that Baba wants us to make room for him in our heart. So that's how I feel about those words I just read. Does anybody have any thoughts they'd like to share?
I'm not sure I understand. It was a lot to absorb.
It is a lot, and of course it incorporates a lot of Jungian psychology, which we have talked about, but to try to put it more simply, even our happy projections, like a romantic relationship, you know, and Baba tells us this too, even in love and marriage, there comes a time where through sacrifice and surrender, you know, the way he describes raising a family and being together for a long time, the lust completely diminishes and becomes more of love, and it happens slowly over time. And in a sense, we can extrapolate that whole process to the world in general. We're gradually withdrawing that fascination with the creation, and more slowly and surely, we will come to know that the life in Baba is what our soul's only desire is. Does that make sense, Tina?
Yeah, but I mean, what is the sentence about the transpersonal nature? There are a lot of big words. It kind of went.
I know, and you know, I think I read a part that I wasn't going to read. I couldn't see my highlighting well enough because I try to keep it a little more basic. So just forget about that other stuff, okay? Because with Baba, we don't need the transpersonal. You know,
okay.
What I love about the work is that it's practical. You know, Baba doesn't want us to backbite. He wants us to love those that we can't love. And to me, the work gives me a step-by-step process to live that more and more. And that's really what matters. And I also find that by remembering Baba more and more, that helps me. And I notice the challenges still arise. So today we're going to start our inquiry now. And if you just arrived, the statement we're working on is, he or she should try to understand how I feel. So this is the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, the statement 3, the advice we would give them. We're not saying that they should love us more. We're just saying they should understand how I feel. So it's kind of a more doable type of advice. And we've talked about that in the previous sessions. So everybody, if you haven't found your situation, find your situation where you really can honestly, reliably believe the thought that somebody should try to understand how you feel. And we'll just take a minute, and then I'll just make sure that everybody's ready to go through inquiry. Does anybody need more time to find their stressful thought? He or she should try to understand how I feel. Can everybody find that? Okay, great. I like that. So I say they because somebody has a he, somebody has a she. So that's why I'm going to go through inquiry saying they. And I want you to try to stay in one situation with the person that you've chosen. Try to find a situation in time and space. Where were you? What time of day was it? How recently was it? And you can refer back to that as you answer these 4 questions, because the work really is meditation. And, you know, my role as the facilitator is to just contain the inquiry so that you can drop inside and access your inner wisdom, which is Baba's voice in our hearts, our intuition. Okay, so just take a few gentle breaths. So the first question, is it true that they should try to understand how you feel? And when you're ready, it's just a yes or a no. And if you want to join, be sure to unmute so we can do the group inquiry. Is it true that they should try to understand how you feel?
Yes.
Yes.
So the second question, when you say yes to the first question, I want you to ponder this next statement for a full minute and before you respond with a yes or a no. This is where you're actually going to go beyond that binary thinking of black and white. You're going to just open your mind to, it's like the don't know mind. You know, Katie talks a lot about the don't know mind and how wonderful it is. And I know Baba says true knowledge is knowing that we don't know anything. So can you absolutely know that it's true that they should try to understand how you feel? Now take a full minute and just ponder that. And then whatever answer you give is just fine. Can you absolutely know that it's true that they should try to understand how you feel? Has everybody found their answer? Okay, I just have to leave for 30 seconds. I'll be right back. Okay. So the next question is, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought that they should try to understand how I feel? So Diantha, if you can put up the question 3 with the sub questions, we're going to look at that. And I'm going to ask you some of these sub questions. What the sub questions help with is they help us not just go into a story with how we react when we believe the thought. Normally what we do is we start telling stories about how we react. And so these sub-questions help us notice how we actually are reacting. Let's see, where is it? It's Q3. No, here, Diantha, it's called Q3 sub-questions. Up higher, there you go. Yay, thank you. Okay, so how do you react when you're believing the thought that they should try to understand how you feel? So first of all, what emotions do you feel when you're believing that thought? Really tune in to what emotions you feel, and please share when you find emotions.
I guess for me, it's anger and frustration.
Did you say anger and frustration?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So in my situation, which we've been working on the same situation for several weeks, and my situation was that my husband, I wanted him to move to Myrtle Beach and he didn't want to. And when I was believing the thought that he didn't love me enough, and that I wanted him to do what I want, and that he should try to understand how I feel, I felt really sad. And I was going around with a contracted heart and feeling really like a victim and pretty helpless. So anybody else want to share emotions that you feel when you're believing your thought that they should try to understand how I feel?
I would describe it as a frustration and a constriction the heart and my being.
Oh, great. So you just answered the next sub-question, which is, where do you feel it in your body, and describe the sensations. So what we like to do here, Douglas, if you're willing, is to go into that constriction in your heart, and everybody go into the emotion that you're dealing with and find where it is in your body. Mine's also in my heart. It's a sadness and it is a constriction. And we're going to go, as we've done every time, into the witness mode. The witness is completely detached from this earthly experience. It's the objective observer. And when we are able, through practice, to stay in the witness mode, something else will arise. Information, an image, or perhaps the stressful feeling and sensation will diminish, or it will move somewhere else. So, Douglas, are you willing to share, like if we all do this, and then if I ask you to report what happens, would you be willing to share?
Sure.
Okay, so everybody, we're going to go for 60 to 90 seconds into those uncomfortable emotions and sensations. And just observe. You're the witness. So Douglas, can you describe to me what you noticed?
Well, the constriction in my heart kind of felt there was a sadness and a heaviness to it, and tightness, and it kind of went into my stomach and got more sort of anxious and even a little sort of desperate.
Okay.
Like I
So,
don't.
yeah. Okay. So if you practice doing this when you notice the stressful, so thought precedes emotion, and when you can identify what you're thinking and believing that's causing your suffering, and then go into those sensations and emotions, probably with practice, in my experience, something will arise that will diminish the sensation, or you'll have an image, and it's often from childhood, where we're actually carrying the belief that as a child, we had the thought, probably with our parents, they should try to understand how I feel. And so we keep projecting that into our current life, just because we have to undo all of these things that we've created. So this is something that can become just an ongoing practice for us. I noticed for myself, when I went into the constriction and sadness in my own heart, it felt very poignant to me. It was almost like there was a sweetness in the pain in my heart, and I was able to just be with it, and it felt like it was a resolving of that pain, which needs to be felt. Tina, are you willing to share what happened?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to clarify. So there's a thinking piece that I think I missed. Is that what you were saying? A cognitive piece?
Well, the cognitive piece is the stressful thought. They should try to understand how I
Oh, okay.
feel.
Yeah, yeah.
And in the work, Byron Katie says thought precedes emotion.
Right.
So, yeah. Does that explain it?
Yeah, yeah, I got
Yeah.
that. Okay.
And so when we're believing a stressful thought, there's always going to be those stressful emotions and sensations, which as a civilization, we've tended to repress and suppress because they're not comfortable. They're, you know, we don't know what to do with them.
Right.
And now we know that we can actually honor them, that they have information in them and that they don't last. Something will shift. And that's been my experience. So Tina, what was your experience?
Well, you know, I still working on my father, and I think it's like more of a tightness in chest and stomach, and I'm still just observing it. It didn't.
You're still, yeah.
It didn't really change.
Oh, okay. Well, remember, the deepest work we do is on father, mother. It's like Katie says, if you want to get the job done, do the work on father, mother. Most of our projections onto others stem from our early childhood. And so
the interesting thing is, like, my son behaves a lot like my father.
Yeah. And so this is where that detachment that Baba, what I read about in discourses, it's the hardest work, but it really pays off. When you can become detached from your son and still love him, that's what brought me to the work, was the work on my daughter, because I was going down. I was so depressed over my daughter's depression. And I kind of dug myself out of a hole bit by bit, but it's hard work. And you take it one step at a time, gentle and slow. But when you do the work on your father, you can know that that's probably going to heal a lot of relationships.
Yeah, I feel like I do accept my son in the way he is, but
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to another sub-question. And this is kind of a obvious one when you've been doing the work for a while. In the early session of the inquiry circle, we just talked about 3 kinds of business. Katie discovered that there was 3 kinds of business. There's your business, my business, and God's business. So there's other people's business, my business, and God's business. And every time we leave our own business, we suffer. And of course, Baba tells us our business is to love him. So this sub-question is, whose business are you in? So we notice, like, I'm in my husband's business. Everybody notice whose business you're in. It's always the cause of suffering because we leave ourselves. And of course, if Baba lives in our heart, we're leaving that remembrance of him. So how do you treat that person when you're believing the thought that they should try to understand how you feel? Notice how you treat that person. And if you feel like sharing, please do.
Well, I think with Mother, I tried to get negative attention because he pretty much just didn't pay any attention to me.
Yes, yes. And I mean, that is, you know, it really touches my heart when you say that, Tina, because, you know, a precious little child is just wanting attention from their father. And, you know, and so we talked again about going back into the inner child and giving to yourself, giving to that part of yourself what your father couldn't give you. We become the parent that we wanted, and we let our parents off the hook, and it's an ongoing work. And I know you've been giving yourself that, because I know I looked at your website and your career, and I just think you've probably gotten incredible amounts of wonderful attention in your life. And what a positive way, you know, to get that attention that your father couldn't give you. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So in my situation, I wanted my husband to try to understand how I felt about wanting to move to Myrtle Beach. And so I treated him with distancing. I noticed that I just wasn't feeling as warm and loving towards him. Anybody else want to share if you notice how you treat that person that you're working on? When you're believing the thought, they should try to understand how you feel.
I know my internet connection isn't very good, but this is Jackie. And I distance myself from, I'm doing it with my brother. You know, I feel hurt, I feel shut out, I feel it in my throat and my heart, and I feel discounted and undervalued. And then if I feel that he should know how his way of treating me makes me feel, then I distance myself. I'm not going to reach out to him.
Yeah.
He's choosing to shut me out. That's what I think.
So good to notice.
I'm going to shut him out. Yeah.
Good to notice. And just remember, thoughts aren't the truth. They're just thoughts. And our work is to go beyond the mind. And the one way we can do that is by questioning our stressful thoughts. So the next question, the next sub-question of how we react is, how do we treat ourselves when we're believing the thought that they should try to understand how I feel? How do you treat yourself when you're believing that thought? I was treating myself like a powerless victim. Anybody else?
I treat myself as if I had no power, is another way to say that same thing.
Yeah.
Sort of victim place.
Yeah.
And it's a very young place.
Yes. Yes.
As I'm looking at what we're doing, what it says to me is, on every question, don't expect. Don't expect. For me, it's very important. And the first question here was just like that occipital bone, top bone that a chiropractor can set and everything else goes through in alignment if they know how to do this certain Atlas orthogonal technique. What I really appreciate so much is this reminder. Any should have, could have, would have. Oh, they should have been more kind. Oh, you should have. Oh, why didn't you? Could have.
Yes.
Probably
yes,
a lot of from childhood, probably little kids can't say to themselves when we're older, Jeff, Anne, Jackie, don't expect anything. We're so geared to have our desires fulfilled. So what I'm going to really try to practice, because how can I take these lessons and put them into some kind of a real focus? And to me, it's practice not expecting. Somebody doesn't talk kindly to me, don't expect. I can then say, could you just be a little bit more kind? That really, but by forgetting to not expect, by forgetting to not expect, I shoot myself in the foot.
Well, and you said the magic word in there, desire. This is because, Baba tells us the cause of suffering is desire. And these are all our desires. They seem insignificant, but they happen all day long.
Yes, they do.
He should understand how I feel. That's a desire. And every time we desire, we suffer. And it's fascinating to see, Darwin Shaw calls it the wanting machine, right? And so what I love about this self-inquiry is that it's just another way to unwind this addiction to creation and to wanting everything to be the way we want it. I mean, can you imagine what would it like to be desireless? I mean, it's beyond the mind, so we can't imagine it really. But thank you, Jeff, for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So another sub-question that's worth looking at is, what addictions or obsessions manifest when you're believing the thought that they should try to understand how I feel? Just notice. We all have our little go-to, whether it's food or, obsessive thinking, recycling, like what Jeff was saying, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Does anybody have something they would like to share about an obsessive or addictive behavior that happens when we believe that?
Father, he didn't like when I wouldn't eat what my mother made for dinner because he had worked hard to make that. So I refused to eat as a, pretty regular thing.
Okay, so that was your obsession, was just don't give him what he wants, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, good to notice. Our egos have all this modus operandi, and all we can do is notice it with a lot of compassion, and then that we wear out these habits bit by bit. It doesn't change overnight, and you cannot beat yourself up. I mean, when I was starting to do the work, I was in such a hurry and I was making myself sick. And then I remembered, Katie saying, be gentle with yourself. Just take one baby step at a time. If we can just slowly unwind these things, we're making progress. So we have to be really gentle with ourselves. So now let's just notice, what do you fail to see when you're believing the thought that they should try to understand how I feel? What do you fail to see when you're believing that thought?
In my father's case, I don't want to monopolize, but.
Oh, we love it when you monopolize. Right, everybody? Everybody's an introvert, and
so I like to talk about myself. I have to tell you.
Okay, you came to the right place, girl.
So I guess what I failed to see is, like, he's not like a warm, fuzzy person. He's not expressive. He's not self-reflective. That's not his style, to be like nice to me and take an interest in me and say nice things to me. That's not who he is.
Yes. Oh, I love that you said that. My husband is a man of few words, and sometimes it bothers me. I take it personally, but you know what? It's just the way he is. It's not personal. In fact, nothing is personal. Not even any thoughts. Thoughts aren't even personal, but we attach to them and we believe it's all about us. Does anybody else want to share?
I'll share a story. I'll share a story. This is Jackie, if you can hear me.
Hey, Jackie.
I was working on my brother, and how I had lunch with him and my sister last Wednesday, and I felt very shut out by him.
Yes.
And it's an old behavior pattern. Anyway, what I failed to see or know since then, it doesn't explain all of it. Some of it is his personality and behavior. He is a very private person, but he's hard of hearing, and he refuses to wear hearing aids or get them.
I know that one too.
And I didn't know that, so my sister's theory is that he couldn't hear half of what we were saying or what I was saying, and he just turned to her and kind of ignored me, So, so it's interesting. We can personalize things that we shouldn't. It doesn't mean that there isn't still a pattern and a relationship thing that needs to be healed there. But, here's a factor that I didn't observe and I didn't know, and I've since learned.
Yeah. So. Well, and so you failed to see, that, he has, and that happened with my husband for a long time. I kept repeating myself, and finally I just said, I think you should get your hearing checked. And it turned out, he sure did need hearing aids.
Wow.
So we fail to see these things. And then, you said your brother still has his personality stuff. But the beauty of the work is that nobody else has to change. I mean, we can find our freedom just by consuming our own egoic behavior. And in my experience, the people around us tend to change around us. But we're not dependent on anybody else changing. And that is just, like, to me, the most wonderful thing. So, anybody else want to share before we, Tina?
I just want to say, like, well, I've been in Al-Anon for a long time, and they have these slogans, and they say, don't take it personally, even if it has your name on it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it literally is never personal. Because we're all walking around projecting our programs onto each other, you know, and hopefully as Baba lovers, our programs are becoming more loving, right? But it's not always the case. And it just helps to know that it's not personal. It's really been a key for me in becoming more free of attachment to anything that people are doing or saying.
It's so easy to see, like, in an external situation, like, you know, in a work situation, this colleague of mine was complaining about another colleague not acknowledging her. And,
yes.
and even to know that the person who didn't acknowledge her was, you know, a very self-absorbed person, and she was never going to acknowledge this person. And, you know, that's just who she is.
Yeah. And so in the work we say, take out the middleman and give yourself what you want someone else to give you. And it works like magic. It's like we have to stop wanting all these things from other people. And there's so many things we can give to ourselves. And we're going to find that when we go into the turnarounds here. But let's go on to question 4. Who would you be without the thought that they should try to understand how I feel? We're done with that now, Diantha. You can just put Baba back up, please. This is just the 4th and last question. So,
could you read it again, please?
You know that picture of Baba where he's staring like intensely? I love, that's like one of my
like
favorites.
Every other picture.
Oh, well, no, you know the one from London? Diantha, you know that one of mine that's a favorite?
The one for, okay, but what's he look like when he's staring intensely?
He's like, I don't know. This is fine. We can
older or younger?
He's young.
Is that it?
Well, that's fine. Leave it. We're good.
Okay.
We'll have a separate conversation, and then you'll remember my old favorite.
Okay.
Anyway, who would you be, everybody, without the thought that they should try to understand how you feel? Who are you without that thought? Just ponder that for a minute, and then when you're ready, just share what you noticed. Who are you without that thought?
Thoughtless.
What?
You're thoughtless.
Thoughtless in a good way, right?
Absolutely in a good way. Thoughtlessly good. The best. Without that thought, you feel thoughtlessly good because there's no desire, pull. I want, I should. It's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
I have this photo. You might be thinking of this photo of Bob, but I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, hold it up because I can't see it. Oh, no, I mean, I love that one. They're all good. You can't go wrong with Baba. So it's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Anybody else want to share who you are without the thought before we move on to the turnarounds?
I'm just more complete, more whole, more confident.
Yeah. And in your business, right?
Yeah.
You're back taking care of yourself, nurturing that relationship with Baba in our heart. You know, we're just remembering him. We're, you know, and I notice, especially as the years have gone by, without the stressful thought, I feel compassion. I feel compassion for everyone, for that person, for myself, for the human condition. It's like, you know, Baba says everything that's happened had to happen and no one's to blame, right? It's just what it is. So we're going to move on.
Detached when
what?
It does lead to detachment.
Yes, detachment. Oh, thank you. Detachment. Oh, we can just hang on to Baba's Daman with two hands and you know, we could even say detachment, but it's more fun to say Baba. We can be attached to Baba. I don't think there's any problem with being attached to Baba, so we can go all the way home with him.
It's the only attachment.
That's right. So Diantha, why don't you put up the turnarounds for they should try to understand how I feel. Okay. And we're going to work on our turnarounds now.
I might need a little bit of help because I have all of these.
It's for the advice. Let's see. I just sent it to you a few days ago.
I know, and I put it in this.
Here it is, the shoulds. It might be the turnaround shoulds.
It's the second one.
Just go, it's.
Oh, right here.
I think that's it.
Oh, that's criticism.
Oh. What did, okay, so.
They don't love me enough? Is it love me enough?
It's they should try to understand how I feel. Oh, you found it.
Yeah, Robin helped me.
What did I call it?
Seeking love. Or something like that.
Oh, sorry. I have to figure out how to get organized, you know. I'm sort of learning as I go. I've never done a virtual inquiry circle.
Yeah, so I'll just retitle it. It's fine. It's great.
Okay. So this is our, so. Yes. All right. So we're going to do the turnarounds now for they should try to understand how I feel. And this is where we find 3 genuine specific examples for each of the turnarounds below that could be as true or truer than your original statement. And do try to be specific. So the first one is to ourselves. In your situation that you're working on, I should try to understand how I feel. And just see if you can find examples where that could be true, as true or truer than that they should try to understand. I can tell you in my situation with my husband, I just needed to feel the longing in my heart to be at Baba's home in the West, and I could honor that. I could just be with the pain of acknowledging that, you know, this is something that I wanted. It was a desire that's probably not going to be fulfilled. I should try to understand how I feel. Does anybody else have an example for that turnaround to yourself?
So I'm thinking of a situation with my wife that what I'm getting to here is that I should basically recognize that what I'm wanting from her, I have within myself to give myself. That makes sense.
Yes, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And this is what we're working on. Every time we project something, you know, that we want onto another, then we've left ourselves. And it's always within us. It's always within us. And when I did try to understand how I feel, the inspiration came to me that I could just go spend a few months in Myrtle Beach, and it all worked out. And so we can always find proactive solutions in these situations. And does anybody else have an example that they would be willing to share?
Well, I can see that I cut myself off from my feelings.
Yes.
When I feel hurt and cut out and feel like they don't understand my feeling, I learn not to feel their feelings or, you know, to express them in indirect ways, the negative feelings. So I'm doing that to myself. What I feel they're doing to me, I'm also doing to myself.
Yes.
Instead of being connected.
And I do think it's kind of the human condition where we do suppress these uncomfortable emotions. And I should try to understand how I feel. And that means I have to feel it. I just have to feel the pain. And I believe that's probably just a way of consuming our samskaras. Because we can't help it if we feel sad or disappointed or disillusioned. We just have to feel it and notice that's not who we really are. You know, our soul is completely detached from the mental.
And also when I do that, I'm allowing, but he's treating me, I'm treating myself.
Say that again, Jackie.
Oh, well then what I'm doing too is I'm treating myself the very way he's treating me, and
yes,
which numbs me to my feelings and leaves me in the kind of hurt and disconnect.
Yes. Thank you. So now we can go on to the turnaround to the other, which always begins with an I. And on the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet that you can download for free from thework.com, they have the examples of the turnarounds on the bottom right corner of that page. So I should try to understand how they feel. So in your situation, everybody, take a moment and just notice, oh, I'm going to try to understand how they feel. And just take a moment and just ponder that. It kind of reminds me of the prayer of St. Francis, you know, where we ask not so much to be loved as to love, to be pardoned as to pardon. It's like real happiness lies in making others happy. And this is one way. In my situation with my husband, I should try to understand how he feels. And I've said this in the other weeks. He doesn't like hot, humid weather. He's not a Baba lover, and he loves living here in the Rocky Mountains in the rural, you know, area where we have 6-month cold winters because he's really Scandinavian. So I should try to understand how he feels, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. Anybody else have something to share?
Myrtle Beach would be a little different for him.
It's really like completely opposite. We're really dry and, you know, I mean, it's hot here now, but it's always dry. And he likes that. Yeah.
I'm just wondering about the use of the word should, because of a charge on it.
Yeah.
Well, this is because in the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, we always have advice for people. And so what we're doing with getting it down on paper, like Katie says, all war belongs on paper. So we get our war down on paper and we question it. So ideally, we're not going to be giving people advice because in my experience, people really don't like getting advice unless they ask for it. But when we do the work, we're actually laying to rest all these things, because in the turnaround, instead of they understanding how I feel, can I just understand how I feel? Can I just understand how they feel? And then the turnaround to the opposite, they shouldn't try to understand how I feel. And that's what we come to in the work. They shouldn't try to understand how I feel. I mean, if they do, that's great. But generally, you know, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
And maybe too, Tina, like that crossed my mind too. And maybe what I came up with a little bit was that I shouldn't try to understand how they feel. Like just questioning the thought, I should, just turning it around opened up new. Yeah. And I thought about
What if you put it like, what if I tried to understand the way, instead of the word should? I have a little charge on that word.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's one of the questions. It's the statement in the advice we would give, because the advice we would give them is always for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we're just getting our judgments down on paper so that we can lay them to rest. And so, yes, it does have a charge on it.
Okay.
But it's a way, it's like neti, you know, sometimes you have to explore it to be done with it. We're trying to lay these nagging beliefs to rest, because the mind does have a lot of advice. I mean, do you notice, even if you don't give it?
Yeah.
I mean, I notice it. Oh gosh, they should do that. They should do this. They should. But the charge comes off of those thoughts through practicing self-inquiry, because we come to know that no thought is true. It's just a thought, and it has nothing to do with reality. So my experience of the turnarounds is that I sort of experienced the statement as a knot that's tied really tight. And in this situation, it's they should try to understand how I feel. But then when I explore with the 4 questions of the work and the turnarounds, it's like the knot just gets loosened. And it's like it just opens up. And, you know, scientifically, we're developing those neural pathways into the right hemisphere of the brain where we just see a bigger picture of life. And yes, absolutely, Tina, we come to the place where we don't want to give any advice to anyone. But until we reach that point, sometimes it helps to question what what's passing through our minds. Yeah.
I have a question though about they shouldn't try to understand how I feel in an intimate relationship, in a marriage or some relationship of that importance in life.
Yeah.
Understanding each other seems crucial. And so I'm not quite sure how to, I kind of get the intention behind it, but I'm not sure how it applies to that level of relationship.
Well, it does apply actually. And I can say several things on it. So in the work, Byron Katie says the real marriage is to yourself. And we know that's true with Baba. The real marriage is to ourself. And it's great if our partner understands how we feel. And I do experience that sometimes, you know, that there's a real rapport. However, if we're believing that they should understand how we feel and they're not, we really suffer. And so the work is all about just working on ourselves. It's not about changing our partner. And my husband has never done the work. You know, he's told me go do the work, you know, because he knows it's a process that works for me. But it's like, it's given me a certain freedom because nobody has to change. Now, my children, you know, when they were growing up, when they were teenagers, before I found the work, I was constantly giving them advice. And when I found the work and I stopped giving advice, they actually started coming to me and asking me for advice. And even if I would say, I don't know what's right for you, but in your situation, I might do this. But it's also true in a marriage. I don't know. I have found that if I can just stay in my own business and do my own inner work and share what I discover, my husband changes, my children change, everybody around me changes when I do my inner work. And I love the independence of not waiting for somebody else to change so that I can feel better. That's my experience. I know it's very radical. I mean, Katie has written several books that address, you know, romance, love, marriage, and all of that. And it's a little book. It's only $10. It's called Question Your Thinking, Change the World. And she has sections on marriage, money, health. And it's like paragraphs that just explain this mind, this kind of mindless mind that she lives out of. And I just have found it to be quite liberating. And it's not conventional wisdom, that's for sure. but in my experience, if a couple does and I don't have a lot of experience with other couples, but I've worked a lot with one person in a marriage, and many of the clients who I've worked with personally have found a lot of freedom in just working on themselves and not working on their partner. They work on their partner, but it's all how it comes back to them. Like just yesterday, I had a new client who, her husband is immature, and she could give a whole lot of examples, a lot of proof of how immature he is. But it also came out in the inquiry that she's really controlling and bullying, and she saw that about herself. And so it's like she can get out of his business and just work on her own controlling, bullying nature, And I told her, in my experience, when you work on yourself, your relationship does change.
I guess ideally, I would see it'd be great if both people were actually doing this work.
Well, I've never found that the world is very ideal, and I just decided to work on myself.
Yes, well, that's probably the way to do it.
Right. I've been in a very long-term marriage, and and this is another thing we talked about another week. In Jungian psychology, we tend to project, falling in love is a magnificent thing, but the honeymoon does end, psychosis. And then you come to see that we're all just these ordinary people. But to me, the most beautiful thing from Jungian psychology is when you can actually love that ordinary human being that you're married to, just for all of our foibles and quirks, because we all have them. And there's something so sweet in that. And, I saw that with the Mandali too. I was fortunate to be able to meet, a half dozen of them before they exited this plane. And I just noticed that there was such a sweetness and humility in their personalities, and just, it's like, we're just never going to be whatever our ideal is, we all have our little personality traits. And looking for completeness in another person is just hopeless.
It's a setup.
It's a perfect set. And in that book I was reading from, the Sufi book about the catching the thread, he talks about that too, that romantic love is great, but you have to get to the place where it's just the stepping off point for the real marriage, which is the inner marriage, the lover beloved. And I was a real romantic, and fortunately for me, I was friends with my husband for many years before we got married, and I think that has allowed us to have a good relationship, into our 70s here. So
was he romantic when you met him?
Well, so we lived in I call it a spiritual community. It was an intentional community, and it was very strict. And so, you couldn't even talk to the opposite sex for more than 10 minutes. It was actually really good for me, because I had been a hippie and I really needed boundaries and, all that stuff. But we worked together and we were friends for 7 years. And then it's like that my heart just opened to him. Like we were working literally across the table from each other. And one day all this light came down and just went through my heart and surrounded him in light. And I was never attracted to him. I just thought he was a really nice person. And my heart opened, and that was like 33 years ago, and we've been married ever since. And he said he waited for me for 7 years.
So I guess I don't know if he was romantic at first, and then
he was romantic after my heart opened to him, and I was.
And then he stopped being romantic.
Well, that's a good question. I can only say that over a long marriage, everything changes. And I think it just turns more into, like what Baba says, lust just grows slowly into love. And And yes, he's romantic in a way. I mean, he does really nice things for me. I mean, he sends me to India. He sends me to Myrtle Beach. He supports everything I want to do. I mean, that's romantic, right?
I don't know if that's what
you chant
want.
together in the morning, right? That's romantic.
I don't know if you want like the flowers.
I guess romance isn't so important, you know.
I don't know.
Just not important.
What he wanted, and if he was.
He was very romantic in our early years, you know, when we were having children, and yes, and he was also a wonderful father. But yes, we had romance when we were younger.
It wasn't said this way, but I've heard this expression: "We fall in lust." Then maybe we fall in love as that bonding, that marriage goes on and on. But that romantic beginning, that extraordinary period of just that love is extraordinary. But we all know 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years later, 30, 33 years later, there's just this extraordinary bond of friendship and love that you want to do for each other. You do it naturally. You know what each other love.
Yeah. Thank you. Well said. Yes, that's definitely my experience. Anybody else have any comments? Anything you'd like to share? It's, you know, it's just the work of a lifetime, isn't it? And this is just one modality that I really felt Baba gifted me with, that has helped me come closer to him. And that's really why I like to share it. And I do have a few closing quotes. Let's see, what do I have? The Path of Love, page 40 and 41. So, Baba says, Hafez also advises against the futility of trying to catch the falcon of knowledge when he says that nothing but emptiness can ever come into the net of imagination. Thus, the most powerful mind in imagination is entirely helpless against knowledge because it comes only after all power of imagination is completely and absolutely exhausted and ended. For imagination to go, mind must go. And for knowledge to come, consciousness must remain. Only when the mind disappears does consciousness get freed of all imaginary this and that and I and you. The moment of consciousness is freed from all imagination. This consciousness of nothing is all at once transformed into knowledge of everything. And then I have a humorous quote too, and then we can just chat for a few minutes if you like. This is from Darshan Hours with Erich Jesawala and Rick Chapman. And I don't know, let's see. It is because being the avatar, I do not act, but become everything as everything. The avatar who is infinite knowledge becomes infinite ignorance too. He says, I am the Lord of the universe. I know everything. I have given you your body. I reside in you. Yet I ask you daily about your health. Do you know why? I want you to be healthy so that I can pulverize you in my love. I don't know. I love that. I give and I demand, such is the dual role that I play eternally with creation. So our beloved is quite a beloved.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So
we're getting pulverized.
We are. By God's grace, you know, we want to be pulverized in his love. And, you know, all of these desires we have to be understood and all of that, you know, hopefully we're just learning to let that go. Slowly but surely. And, you know, Baba says we have to have infinite longing and infinite patience. So here we are. Oh, and then I'll just say this in the recording. Diantha may not be available next week, but if you want to show up, there's a chance that she'll be here. And if not, then we will resume the following week to finish up this worksheet. On seeking love. We've been working on this worksheet on seeking love outside of ourselves for a month now. So, you know, it's a big one. So if anybody wants to say anything, now's the time.
I just want to know about Diantha's plans.
Diantha wants to know her plans too.
I want to know where